I'm going to talk about evaluating courses and teaching, which was chapter 14 in a handbook for teaching and learning in higher education. I like the quote that the authors begin the chapter with, so I'm going to begin my presentation by reading it to you all. Evaluation is a way of understanding the effects of our teaching on students learning it. It implies collecting information about our work, interpreting the information, and making judgments about which actions we should take to improve practice. Evaluation is an analytical process that is intrinsic to good teaching. So in 1971, the Assessment of University Teaching was published in Britain, and the idea that teaching in higher education was to be evaluated was very controversial. Some academics considered it an insult to their academic autonomy, and others thought it was pointless to know students' opinions. After working in evaluation the last 3 years, wow, times have changed. Today, evaluation is seen as a normal part of the teaching and learning experience. It helps hold faculty accountable, it helps improve teaching practices, and it is used for promotion and tenure. Evaluating courses and teaching is critical to identify both areas that need improvement and strengths. It also helps committees such as the Curriculum Oversight Committee at MCG make changes to courses and teaching faculty when necessary. I'm a member of the evaluation team at MCG, which is a team that reviews every single course or clerkship at MCG, all the way from reviewing the syllabus to faculty and course evaluations to a director's report that is put together by the director, which includes performance measures, objectives, and how, whether or not they were met, processes for feedback, etc. Evaluations have served different overall purposes depending on where the higher education institution is. For example, in the United States, evaluations for many years have been standardized questionnaires developed mostly for summative purposes to assess teaching performance when making decisions about promotion and tenure. While in the United Kingdom and Australia, evaluation purposes at higher education institutions have been mostly formative and developmental, hence to improve the quality of the teaching experience. Their focus is typically on courses and individual lecturers. So since I brought up these two terms, summative and formative assessment, I want to provide a brief description of each. Summative assessment is used to measure the level of success, which in the form of evaluating courses would be using formal course evaluations, or if it's evaluating students, it's things such as an exam. While the purpose of formative assessment is to gather feedback that can be used by the instructor and the students to improve the teaching and learning experience. For example, course evaluations that are done at the beginning or midway through a course rather than at the end, or asking students to submit a sentence describing the point of a particular lecture that they just had. So before I get into the evaluation cycle, here is a short video explaining the importance of feedback.
So let's say this. We today are let's say we're in Philadelphia, and we're going to drive to New York City. How far is Philadelphia to New York City? It's 2 hours. So now we know we have East Coasters in the room. Welcome. So it's 2 hours. So you get on, let's say, 295, and then you get on the Jersey Turnpike, and you've been driving an hour, and all of a sudden you see a sign for Delaware. What do you know? You went the wrong way. When you drive from Philly to New York, there is no Delaware, okay? Delaware is like down here. Now, how many people want to know way before Delaware, which is a good hour from Philly, that you went the wrong way? Yeah, like fast, right? And yet at work, we kind of wait for the right moment. I'm waiting for the right moment to give feedback when I'm comfortable, which will be the day I die, right? So there are two purposes of feedback and only two purposes, okay? Number one, you're off track and we want you back on track. Number two, you're doing an awesome job and you deserve to know. Again, most of us get almost no feedback. And the feedback we do get, I wouldn't even call feedback. I'd call it vague garbage, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's say this. Let's say it's Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day falls on a Friday. And you leave work early, and you go to Whole Foods, and you spend all this money on like amazing ingredients. You buy like fresh fish and flowers and chocolates. And you go home and you make whoever you live with, your parents, your spouse, whatever, you make them the most amazing meal. And you spend all this money and all this time. And the person never says thank you. What are you going to do next Valentine's Day? Yeah, you're going to buy yourself a watch, right? So don't assume that because it's good, people will keep doing it. If they don't know it's good, they won't keep doing it. So 2 purposes of feedback: you're off track, you're driving to Delaware, you should be driving to New York, or you're on track.
So now about the motives and context. There are many motives for evaluating the impact and effectiveness of teaching in courses. New lecturers can find out if they're doing okay. Lecturers can find out what their strengths and weaknesses are and how their teaching compares with others. Module coordinators can find out how well their course units are running, and staff can determine how well various component units came together. It's important to note that the drivers of feedback are extrinsic as well as intrinsic. There are 3 principal sources of feedback that are widely recognized, which are the first 3 on this list, and there are advantages to each. For example, feedback from students offers direct access to the learner's perspectives. Students are uniquely qualified to comment on matters such as clarity of presentation, pacing of material, access to online resources or library facilities, bunching of assignment deadlines, and helpfulness of a tutor's feedback on their written work. There are some instances when colleagues and professional peers are better suited to comment. For example, on the appropriateness of course aims, content and structure, on the design of resource materials, or on alternatives to assignments and exams. Self-generated feedback is grounded in the day-to-day teaching experiences, perceptions, and reflections of the individuals concerned. The aim of self-generated feedback is not to enable university teachers to act as judge and jury in their own cause, but rather to promote self-security and cultivate reflection. The 4th source of feedback often goes unnoticed and is referred to as incidental feedback, which is found in the everyday routine of higher education learning and doesn't use survey techniques like the other 3 sources. It includes readily available information such as attendance levels, pass or fail, progression, dropout rates, the nature of the choices that students make in choosing between specific assignment topics, etc. It also includes the observations found in lectures, such as do the students seem tired, distracted, are they participating? This figure shows the sources and methods of feedback. Questionnaires are popular for obtaining feedback from students, and observations are one type of method used for self-generated feedback and feedback from colleagues. It can be by observing oneself or peers, respectively. Both can also consist of retracing or going back over what was taught, how it was taught, etc. And incidental feedback can be done through monitoring things such as attendance patterns. It can also include observations as mentioned previously, such as observing whether or not students seem tired, bored, or distracted during a large lecture. Any technique used to obtain feedback is going to yield data that needs to be analyzed and interpreted. This is what I do at MCG in our evaluation department. I sort through tons and tons of data and create reports for faculty members, students, different types of teams and committees, and different aspects of our curriculum change every year, can change every year after reviewing these courses, such as a course sequence, a course length, maybe go from lecture to small group learning for specific topics, and several others. Just to summarize what you have learned today, here's the evaluation cycle. First, the motives and context should be clarified. Second, decide the focus and timing. Next, choose the sources of feedback and the methods used to gather this feedback. Fifth, analyze and interpret the findings from the feedback. And last, agree on resulting actions and implement changes.